Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being the show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lincoln Rhyme. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, the case that the team gets this episode is a kidnapping case, because it turns out the daughter of a guy named Alexander who's running for Congress, as a congressman, his daughter ends up getting kidnapped. Interesting enough, Alexander being played by, I want to say the actor's name is Victor Williams, obviously like Deacon from King of Queens. I know he was in one season of Leftovers, because I only ever saw the first season. I need to circle back to that show at some point in time. But the fact of the matter is, he's most recently, I saw him in Hunters, the Amazon Prime show. There was something else I saw him in fairly recently, and I just can't remember what it was now. Right, USA Connection, because obviously USA falls under the NBC umbrella. He was in season 2 of The Sinner, so really quickly getting that out of the way. But basically, it turns into this thing of like, okay, so there's cameras showing like her walking down this hallway, but there's like one particular part of it that wasn't covered by cameras. But it's like, how did she get taken and stuff like that, you know? Because at first Lincoln, because I think Lincoln wasn't going to be a situation where Lincoln wasn't going to take the case, but he was talking about the fact is that this guy is, because it's a whole thing of like, oh, even though he's from he's rich, he's still, he's trying to make changes on behalf of the people. He's a politician for the people, politician of the people type of situation. And, Lincoln's kind of making some cracks about it, because the fact is that he doesn't trust any politician. But Amelia's like, at the end of the day, this is his daughter, and I think because Lincoln knows of the connection that Amelia has to this, that I think that's even more reason why it's like, okay, let's do this. Because later on, because after talking to Alexander of just like, I need, because obviously Salito and Lincoln have kind of agree, and even Amelia kind of agrees that maybe they shouldn't pay off the ransom, because the fact of the matter is there's no telling that the kidnappers might kill her the moment they get what they need, because it also comes down to it. You actually see it later on without going, I'm skipping around a little bit, but they weren't wearing masks or anything, and that's the thing. In situations where the kidnappers show you their face, that's never a good sign. The fact is they weren't wearing masks or anything, either because it was not necessary anymore, but the fact is that their faces were clear, shown the entire time, then that must mean that they had no intentions of keeping her alive. At least one party in this whole situation. We'll kind of elaborate on that later on, but obviously, it's like, you want me to just wait, because he's gathering up the money, he wants to pay the ransom, but they're telling him just to wait, because it's like, at the end of the day, we all want to get your daughter back. And obviously, this whole situation's got Amelia stressed, because it's just a reminder of what happened to Rachel, because she's like, I can understand when someone you love is in danger and you don't know what the outcome could be, you're scared. And so she was drinking water and she was kind of shaking. She's like, okay, I'm good, because she's trying to keep a calm, cool, and collected front in front of Lincoln. And he's like, are you okay? She's like, yeah. And he's looking at her. She's like, he's like, yeah, it reminds you of Rachel, because you know what you can do. But the fact of the matter is, because kidnapping cases are a completely new beast all on their own, because murder, it's like we're getting justice for a victim, but it's like it's a whole other thing of like it's kind of a race against time, and and it kind of comes up later on in the episode. Kidnappers, depending on who they are, can be very erratic, so the situation could tip in any direction, hey, they let the victim go, or they straight up kill the victim, so it turns into that thing. Obviously, Amelia gets some thoughts about the bone collector thing, which we'll circle back around to later on when I kind of focus on that side of things. But looking into really quickly, I should also bring up, I love the fact that you had that situation where Felix was like, Lincoln, and Lincoln was like, what, you got something? He's like, no. He's like, then why'd you call me? It's like, almost like, just so you know how it feels. And Lincoln just looks at him, and I love that Kate's in the middle working at something, and she has to turn around and look at Felix almost like, are you stupid, Felix? Why would you do? And he was like, and now I realized kind of essentially like that was actually not the best choice for me to make. Because even I'm like, why would you do that? Lincoln's actually been a little less pushy lately, and it's like you want to purposely piss him off. I get it. It's just like his small little tidbit of revenge, but that was just, I just love that. But nevertheless, they ended up looking into a lot of, stuff, because it turns out like she had gotten into it. Like they found out about her boyfriend, which her boyfriend was kind of, it was kind of a kept secret, just because like, well, her dad, is kind of like this upstanding citizen, and it's like, well, because he's running, like the fact of the matter is his family's under a microscope, that would have turned into a complicated thing. But the fact of the matter is, Teresa ended up recently learning about her dad, something horrible. Like, it seemed like she was confronting her dad. Because at first I was wondering if this had something to do with what she brought up at the beginning of the episode. Like, don't use me or mom as a platform for you to run, like, mental illness and stuff. Like, she had talked about the fact that's got her issues that she's kind of dealing with. I was like, oh, is it kind of a similar thing? But we'll kind of get to it later on. But I was wondering if it was kind of something of that vein. Well, it was her issues, but also I think, like, her don't use mom's death as a platform. When he was like, you don't think I would do that? Like, I would never use your mom or you as a platform to run to try and like garner sympathy or something like that. But the fact of the matter is, the reason why she made those remarks is because she thought her dad was because at first the guy that's investigating the family thought that she was the one that was embezzling money for the campaign, but it turns out it's actually not her, because she was actually shocked. And she wanted to bring it up to her dad, but apparently she never got the chance to, but she was really pissed at him. And obviously they look into it. And at first, he's like, I have nothing to do with, like, taking money. Because the fact is, I have no need for money. Like, the fact of the matter is, I'm trying to do the right thing. If you need to, you got 15 hours, go ahead and do whatever you need to. Just get back to looking for my daughter at the same time. But it turns out it's actually not even Alexander. It's actually his campaign assistant, Shelby, which earlier in the episode, you had that whole conversation about her being like, no, she was the one that was really pushing for them to, pay to kidnap her, so it seems like she's involved. They go to her place, but she was nearly killed, so it's like, oh, did they turn against her or what? But she ends up talking about the fact is, the debt, she was taking the money, but it wasn't for her. It was her helping pay off her brother's debt, because he's the one that kind of gets mixed up and stuff. And she confronted her brother. Her brother wanted to bail out of it, but the person involved in this didn't want that. Like, the fact of the matter is, he is the one that's kind of pushing her brother to kind of go down this route, even though he was kind of second guessing everything, because it kind of went further than they expected. So that ended up being a very interesting turn of events. I also love that, like, Lincoln kind of took a more, like, interesting approach to obviously looking at the tape of Teresa. He muted it because he's like, once you kind of take away one sense, you can kind of focus on something else. And I think it's like, oh, look at the sign behind her. And he's like, and I love Kate kind of joking, being like, oh, is it because of this and this? That kind of tells you, it's like, no, but because of the lettering and what the sign looks like, he could tell exactly kind of like, particularly what kind of building it was from. But obviously that didn't, well, it was like a OSHA certified building or something like that, like saying that, like, it was something of the sort. So it's just kind of like, that didn't narrow it down, but it gave them some idea. But later on, like, obviously her finger gets sent in, and obviously, her dad, it's worried. It's like, no, we got to pay. But once again, Lincoln's like, the fact is that, considering that Shelby's brother is a common, low grade kind of like common criminal, the fact of the matter is that if we're not careful, things could go sideways, and these type of criminals are unpredictable, so we don't know. For him, it's like, the fact is, do you have a child? And Lincoln's like, yeah, I do. And he's like, didn't you? And Lincoln's like, I do understand. But the fact of the matter is, I would trust someone like me in this position to do this. Because even Claire's like, I know you're worried about your child, but if I was in your position, it was my family in danger, I would trust Lincoln. I would trust no one other than Lincoln to kind of get this job done, to bring them home. So using her finger, they were able to find like samples of it told them what kind of factory she was being held in. It was a rope factory. And luckily, they were able to get there, but it's like, all right, like with the positioning and stuff like that, if we go in guns a-blazing, it's going to be bad, but we also have a limited amount of time because the ransom's supposed to be paid, and backup's not basically going to get here until it's too late. So they kind of get the idea. Well, Lincoln suggests pumping, like, nitrogen into the room to make everyone pass. So, I mean, granted, extended, obviously, being there for a long period of time will kill Teresa, so it's like, you got to get in there and get out. And they do it, and luckily they kind of knock everyone out. Luckily got to Teresa and Shelby's brother without him dying, but the other guy involved ends up getting killed. I think it's kind of interesting too. You don't even get to find out who he really is. All you know is just like her brother rolled with some bad people. That's it. Like someone that they owed money to. So that's all you really get to it. And I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. He's just some other criminal, trying to make money from this whole situation. So, but like I said, like if you notice, they weren't wearing anything. So it's like, it's pretty clear that they were going to kill her when this was all said and done. Like she knew what they looked like. So, but luckily, everything had, kind of, a happy ending to it all. So It's kind of that thing. I even love, because Salito had, shot the guy to protect everybody. And, it's like, and Eric's like, thanks for having my partner. And Salito's like, no, you do the same thing for me. And Eric's like, He's like, you wouldn't do the same thing for me? And he's like, Eric's like, it depends, So having a little fun with the situation. Now, at the same time with all of this is the whole situation with the bone collector. Obviously, he's dealing with the whole fact that, because you even see, like, he's taking off, I was about to call her Claire, Danielle, taking off her shoes because, and he's running and his hands are on her feet, but they're shaking him like, yeah, it's different, huh? Like, this is a victim you have a special connection to. Like, it makes this situation harder. And the fact is, he had his, saw like he was about to cut up her body, but he couldn't bring himself to do it, and he trashes the room. What I thought was really interesting, though, is that later on he picks everything up and meticulously puts it back because, he's a very meticulous person. But I think it's also because maybe there is a form of OCD there, but also I guess he can't have a mess while he's doing this because he can't take the chance that some of that might be some crumb of evidence that leads back to him, because obviously he's going to have to dispose of Danielle's body, because later on he comes back a little more like, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to do this. So I'm assuming he's gonna cut her body up and kind of burn it like it seems like he does every other body, because I don't think he's gonna use her body as like a clue against Lincoln and stuff like that, because to be fair, his back is literally against the wall. Like, they are kind of closing in. He's trying to stay a step ahead, but I don't think he's in a position to really be like gloaty. So I don't think he'd kind of pull the trigger in that regard. Plus, I don't think he want to use her like that. I mean, granted, we don't know. Maybe it was a situation where he doesn't, but I'm assuming he did, because he was like, I'm sorry. So that's kind of, once again, showing the fact is that unexpectedly, I don't know why I said it like that, unexpectedly, Lincoln and them's plan to kind of throw the bone collector off kilter did, and it sadly led to this turn of events, which is slowly making him get more off kilter, because he's not like on top of things. He's kind of, falling behind. But we actually got some interesting insight in this episode too, because we actually learn where the bone collector is getting into his information. Because at first time it's like, oh, maybe he's getting his info from a cop that's like dirty or getting some money on the side. It's like, no, he's talking to some cop that he has a connection to, like maybe someone that's known him the entire time, because he knows like, oh, the bone collector, Peter is in the forensic lane of sides of things, because it's like, oh, the bone collector, I haven't caught him in like 8 years, and he's even said like, Peter, if you were on the job, we know you'd have caught him and stuff like that. But it's like, it's one of those things of like, oh, I'm not with the police force, but it's like, oh, you got those, you still got those friendships and those connections, and he pumps this guy for information. So that's how Peter stays so ahead. So that's how he knew to go dig up that body before Lincoln and them got there. He definitely wasn't that far ahead of them, but far enough that he could bounce without anyone knowing. But the fact of the matter is, at the same time, like in this episode, I kind of, got away from it, but I'm circling back to it's the whole thing about Amelia making a connection. And obviously she was like, no, I haven't, my thought about this whole kidnapping thing, it's about the bone collector case, but we should be worried about that now. But Lincoln's like, when the spark comes of like a thought, you run with it. So Amelia's like, well, we know that, the bone collector kidnapped his victims and then eventually killed them, but, kind of suggesting, well, maybe that wasn't always the case. Obviously, we know he slipped up now. There was at least that one body where he slipped up and maybe there was some evidence. Well, maybe the same thing applies in this case as well. I can't remember timeline-wise. I was about to say timeline-wise, was that... I'm about to get caught up in something else, regardless. The fact of the matter is, it's like... maybe the bone collector did the same thing, kidnapped someone that maybe there was someone that got away that knows what the bone collector looked like. So they kind of looked into that, and Amelia had some files pulled. But I guess it's that thing of like people talk and stuff like that. Because Amelia was like, no one knows about this, right? We had this between us. And it's like, so send those files to Lincoln. She's like, send what to Lincoln? And it's like, Amelia's like, So it seemed like no one would know, but somehow the cop that Peter's talking to knew. So it's like, I guess it's just one of those situations of you can't keep nothing hush. But obviously, Lincoln calls Amelia back, and it's like, oh, we found a guy. I forgot his name, but basically it was a guy that was kidnapped many years ago, but he got away. But even the reports and stuff like that, the cops felt like he was hiding something, and they never knew what. But it's like, okay, this could be our tie to the bone collector. So it turns into a race, because we see Peter's going there and Amelia's going there. Part of me is like, Amelia might get there too late. That's what I was worried about. And I was kind of almost sure of it, because I was like, well, the bone collector had a head start. But to be fair, like, she has the sirens and everything, so she can kind of like speed ahead. So, but when it's all said and done, lo and behold, she gets there first, and she gets talking to the dude. And he's a little nervous at first until Amelia brings it up that the guy that kidnapped you might actually be the bone collector. It's like, what, the serial killer? And at first he's like, no, it couldn't have been him. And then he brings up it being his cousin. I was like, holy, what? Wait, what? I was like, that's actually messed up, your cousin kid. But apparently for him, it's like his cousin got high and stuff like that and did it. He was like, I'm sorry. Because apparently, like, I guess we're kind of diving. I mean, you know, psychologically speaking, like, killers and stuff, like, they come from, like, terrible, like, home upbringings and stuff like that. You know, apparently, like, his home life wasn't that great. So that's why Peter was doing, like, plus apparently he was on drugs and stuff like that. But it's like, nah, he's married. He's been over here. And Lincoln kept pushing, being like, you know, Amelia, get him to tell you the name. Amelia's like, tell me a name. It's like, my cousin Peter. And it's like, boom. And you're also throwing in there the aspect about his wife, which, you know, when the time comes to investigate Peter, going to be like, where's his wife? Has anyone seen his wife for a while? This is going, you know, so it's going to turn into that situation. But we see that Peter's outside and he sees Amelia, and it's like, oh, that's not good. But that just brings out so interesting, like, it would make sense in the grand scheme of things that obviously you weren't perfected at what you were doing, but also it's like, because you made some drugged up mistake that, you know, it's like you had no because I guess for him it's like family's off limits, because I'm just surprised, like, at no shape or form would you ever go back to, like, I'm just saying from the perspective in this show of who he is, being as meticulous as he is, I feel like that would have been a problem you would have nipped in the bud earlier. I mean, you took care of that body situation, but I mean, who's to say he wasn't going to show up there and kill his cousin? You know, I mean, he would have, but maybe, you know, because I mean, I didn't even talk about it, but like he brought it up again, telling Danielle, oh, she should have never opened that box. It's like, once again, you were just too, you know, you shouldn't have hid them what you did. Once again, I brought it up in previously, what was it, last episode, about the whole thing about, like, oh, serial killers keeping their items in the same place as their house. You know, it's just kind of like keeping their trophy so close nearby, and that always ends up being their undoing. I talked about that before, but I'm like, okay, so what does this mean? Because I was kind of scared, because I was thinking, like, maybe if he got to, you know, his cousin first, then he would ambush Amelia and then she'd get taken, but turns out that's not the case. But I'm leaving out the big detail of Lincoln being like, I know that guy, when he hears Peter's name, and it's like, and Amelia's almost looking like, wait, you do? So it's like, all right, so it's going to start, we're going to fill in those blanks, because like we haven't touched on that in forever. Like, we as the audience know that Lincoln and Peter have a connection, that they've met. Now, how much they actually know each other, how much beyond that one interaction. I mean, to be fair, Lincoln has a very extensive mind, so he probably remembers every person he's ever kind of interacted with, or maybe him and Peter have multiple interactions, but they were kind of like in the same group of, like, you know, working their way through, like, essentially like almost like this forensic academy. So he probably remembers them well, maybe just because of certain interactions. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see that lane of just being like, you know, what kind of put Lincoln on his radar, if they even really go down that route of, like, maybe it was, you know, because it seemed like he in particular kind of, it's because of just, like I said, the way they set it up, it seems like Lincoln kind of disrespecting him and underestimated him. Who knows? I don't think he was killing at that point in time. I mean, he probably had some earlier kills at that point in time, but I'm curious, like, where's that line between him kidnapping his cousin to him, his first victim, apparently things being sloppy and there being mistakes, obviously that being the body he disposed of, but what was kind of like the timetable for all that? I'm curious to see if that's something they'll kind of, you know, go over or not. Maybe it would just be something they kind of quickly glance over, or maybe just be completely overlooked. I'm curious to see, you know, how this all gets handled. We'll ultimately just have to wait to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.